Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Free Thought Forum. Once again, this is Tuesday, November the 25th of the year 2014. And we are brought to you by the friendly folks at Pennsylvania NonBelievers. To my right, as our co-host, is Jacob.
Oh, again.
Switch to the thing. That's good. And I am your persona non grata for the day, Doug Diggens. And very glad that you tuned in. Before we get started with the show, Jacob is going to give us an update on some up-and-coming events. And over to Jacob.
Thanks, Doug. So a couple of, after the meetups, I also have a number of announcements to make. For the meetups, our next one is in Lancaster tomorrow, not tomorrow, but on the 26th. It's amazing, when you work night shift, you have no concept of what today or tomorrow is, I'll have to say. But and our next York meetup is on December the 6th. Lebanon's on the 12th of December, on the 10th of December, rather. And Harrisburg in Lemoyne is on the 11th, and Chambersburg on the 18th. Perry County is going to be canceled this week. It's coming December. I hope to restart the meetups in next year. And the final meetup will be in Lancaster on the 26th. And our next program will be on December 9th, where I'll be doing a review of the book Christianity is Not Great, edited by John Loftus. Now, a couple of announcements of other events coming up. We'll also have our annual Winter Solstice Party on December 20th, although the exact details of that are yet, we have not settled on a location yet. So keep in tune for that. We're also making some progress towards our next, arranging our next annual conference, which will be next September. And we haven't announced any of our speaker lineup, but it's looking very promising that we're going to get some very big faces there, so it should be exciting. But in addition to that, something new we're doing this year is holding a fundraiser to collect donations for food for local food banks. And we're doing pretty well in the fundraiser so far. Already raised, our goal is $5,000. And as of this program, we've already raised $1,620. So thanks to everyone who's already contributed. I think we should be able to meet our goal by the conference. And this will help pay for should be around 20,000 meals for local food banks if we meet our goal. So and one other quick announcement for those of you also looking for maybe some other charity work to watch out for. On December 6th, the podcast Dogma Debate will be holding a 24-hour podcast to benefit Foundation Beyond Belief. So just keep that in mind, and I'll hand it back to Doug.
Thank you, Jacob. You know, what you were saying there about, working different shifts and everything, the same is true when you're retired. Oh, son of a gun, you totally lose track of the days, and you think, oh, yeah, well, okay, this is Tuesday. I should go in the studio tonight to record, and then all of a sudden you realize, no, wait a minute, this TV program shouldn't be on today. Oh, it's Monday, and drives you bananas. You get so used to having a routine that keeps your mental clock on time.
Nothing bugs me more than retired people talking about their problems. You're as bad as my dad,
Oh, gee whiz.
Yeah,
it's so
I'm complaining
bad.
about working night shift, and you're complaining about retirement. Really? My dad does the exact same thing.
Yeah, I get no sympathy at all.
No sympathy.
I have to know that figuring out when you're going to wake up is a headache sometimes, Jacob. So
shut up.
Yeah, figuring out when and if you're going to wake up is a chore in itself.
Oh, yeah,
Definitely.
okay, now I can sympathize with that, all right? I can sympathize with that.
Oh, will I wake up tomorrow? I'll plan on it anyway. So anyway, we want to thank you for tuning in. As we've said before, we are in the process of planning our solstice party for this year. And, you know, it has no religious context to the thing. You know, we look for a time to, you know, everyone wants to party. And there's no religious connotation to it, other than everything is new. It's a change of seasons, you know. And
it's one of those points where it's the year's winding down. You're kind of reflecting on the year past and looking forward towards the next year. And I think if you look through history, a lot of different cultures have celebrated something at that time of year.
yeah,
And I think whether many assign to God to it, but as for the reasons I just described, that's why they sort of ascribe those gods to that time of year for that reason, really. And you know, you can still celebrate the general concept without the deity that was assigned to it.
exactly. I mean, does anyone really need a reason to party? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Not at all. You know, so, oh yeah, it's good when you say, yeah, I got a 4th of July and I'm going to celebrate. Yeah, but if it wasn't a holiday, you'd probably celebrate anyway, have a few beers, you know, and turn on some sports.
Right.
And we also do have 2 solstice parties a year. Next year, in June, we will have our summer solstice party, which is usually held outside, and you know, people bring covered dish and all different kinds of food, and
Well, I mean, if you look at other holidays that have had religions attached to them, have usually had a foundation in a secular purpose. You know, like all of the October holidays, things like All Saints Days, or you know, I should say All Hallows Day or Halloween. That's really spawned out of the celebrating the harvest, and it's just, you know. And that's part of the reason why the Celtics ended their year there, was it was the harvest. Okay, now that's kind of, you know, now we're done with the year.
that's not the Boston Celtics.
What's
you know,
that?
I said that's not the Boston Celtics.
Right.
Okay.
No.
But yes, they still celebrate. Okay, one of the questions that I wanted to sort of pose to you here is, what makes something good or bad, or you know, good or evil? And does the declaration of war somewhat mute what is good and bad? And who decides? Who is the arbiter to decide what is evil and what is good? Now, does the majority make the rule? Well, usually, yes, like that. But exactly what conduct would be considered universally good and what conduct would be universally bad, no matter who did it or whose side you were on? I mean, what makes the Taliban or ISIS or even the Nazis bad? Are they good or bad in their own eyes? Well, you know, the 3 preceding groups themselves consider themselves patriots, fighting for their, you know, their respective countries, for their respective nations, and I don't know, is good or evil in the eyes of the beholder? What do you think?
Well, Well, it's an interesting some people would even quibble with the use of the word evil because some people think that has supernatural connotations to it. But if we're talking about good or bad, yeah, it is somewhat. My opinion is that good and evil are somewhat are somewhat of an opinion, but like all opinions, they're based on some basis in fact. Now the facts might be wrong, and they might be incomplete, and you're making a fallacious conclusion from those facts. But that doesn't mean there's not some facts underlying that we can talk about.
Yeah.
Like you look at, say, you bring up the Nazis. They thought they were doing good because they believed certain things about both themselves and Jewish people that were either untrue or unsubstantiated. Mm-hmm. So they thought they felt if those facts were that what they believed was right, then what they did was justified. But I think, because we can prove that what they said wasn't right, we can say they were bad.
Yeah, but the Nazis themselves weren't totally alone in their beliefs. I mean,
No.
there were like anti-Semitic views all over the world, and
Well, that was what happened in Europe was a culmination of something that started during the Crusades.
yeah,
I
and
mean, there was a long string of persecution by Jewish people in Europe all the way up, and it still continues somewhat today.
yeah.
It's just so ingrained.
If you remember back a few years, a little guy by the name of Saddam Hussein. Well, initially, Saddam Hussein was a friend of the United States.
There are so many people in the Middle East that started as a friend of the United States.
And we gave them weapons and everything because he's our buddy. And then all of a sudden, they got what he wanted, and then he decided that he was going to gas or get rid of what they say was some of his own people.
Right.
But
And then when he seized power, he basically terrorized his own Congress by coming in and saying, like, supposedly exposing traitors, where he would read off a list and was reading off all the names of the people in his parliament or whatever it was called, and then ask an informant, is this person a traitor? And if the informant said yes, they dragged the guy out of the parliament right there.
end of story.
Yeah, right in front of everyone to watch. So he terrified. He was inflicted a monstrous amount of fear on his own government right from the start.
Yeah. But I mean, for a while, Saddam Hussein was the poster boy for evil.
Right.
And then there seemed to come along the Taliban.
Yeah.
And that sort of the Taliban put him in the background, okay. And as soon as, of course, Saddam Hussein was caught and executed, like that, the number one fear, of course, was the Taliban. Yet today, what do you hear about the Taliban? Very, very little. Now they are superseded by ISIS, the ultimate evil.
Which even the Taliban hates.
Which even the Taliban hates.
Even the Taliban looks at the ISIS and goes, "What is wrong with you people?"
Yeah.
Well, because I think it's part of that is ISIS isn't afraid to kill. Well, I mean, kill what most Muslims would. How should I phrase this? I'm sorry. The ISIS was even willing to kill their fellow countrymen, which is something that even the Taliban wouldn't do.
Yeah.
Which
which the thing is that every time you turn around, we've got someone or something that seems to be worse than the previous evil. The evil incarnate, oh gosh, it couldn't get any worse than that. But unfortunately, it never seems to end. So you've got to ask yourself, is there an evil force, if you want, that is sort of propelling these people? Is it an entity that takes over, or is evil just something, a word that we use to describe a certain class of people? I mean, people can be, in my opinion, they can be evil all by themselves, and you can judge them just by the deeds that they do.
Right. Well, it's sometimes you deal with context of time, because things we would find horrific today, just a few thousand years ago would have just been seen as normal. And that's, I think, part of the reason why it seems like things get out of hand sometimes, is our tolerance to it has gotten much, much smaller, which actually is a good thing, that we don't tolerate these things as much as we used to.
Yeah, well, I mean, we kind of, at one time, going back even further to like the Vietnam War, that in a way it was a turning point. And although the United States really hates to admit it, the United States forces, committed some atrocities during that time. But who knows, how many that there really were. But fortunately, there were then people that would come out and say, hey, this Lieutenant Calley, he massacred a whole village of the North Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, and they are, he gave the order, and everyone in his squad or wherever it was just totally slaughtered women, children, and everyone in there. Well, no doubt, throughout history that has happened before, and that definitely would put the people that committed that thing on the evil, in the evil category. But someone did come forward and said, hey, we did this, and we were under orders, and people listened, and people were prosecuted because of it. And it seems now, as we look at the rest of the world, that they seem to be getting more and more violent, more and more evil, that actually the United States is becoming better. We're becoming gooder and gooder,
That's a matter of opinion. Well, I wouldn't say the world as a whole is going down. There are certain pockets, I think, that are getting worse and worse, but you look at certain sections that are still making improvements. Like I went to China of about 10 years ago now, and seeing it firsthand, it looked like a country that was very much in transition. Mm-hmm. I mean, they still have work to do on a lot of different rights, but they are making a massive amount of improvements to their country. And if you look at the last president they've just elected, he's really done a lot to try to get rid of the corruption over there, and has even pretty much washed his hands of North Korea, which is a big relief to. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's when China started not being friendly with North Korea anymore, I think we all kind of breathed a sigh of relief.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I mean, that's the only reason we ever feel we have to fear North Korea.
Oh, yeah, I mean, what are they? They're a pissant little country, for crying out loud, unless they've got some big bad, protectorate
Right.
behind them. We just sort of just smite them off the face of the earth like that. But for as long as there are big brothers like China or Russia that are friends, then you can't dismiss countries like Korea and.
And I think another point I'd like to make here is sometimes it's hard to tell if things are really getting worse or are we better informed about them.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing you always have to ask yourself, because things go on today that in the past we wouldn't even know happen.
Exactly.
And I think that's part of the reason things do sometimes feel like they're getting worse, is because information about these things is so much more accessible.
Yeah, and worldwide, China has the ability, and Russia for that matter, to effectively block a lot of our internet and news chatter. However, information does always seem to get through. And for as long as there are people that are out there that are willing to go against the governments who want to suppress the information, and they say, no, we're going to tell you what they're saying in the East or the West, like that, then a country or countries can't put a total cap on what is deemed to be the truth or on news.
I mean, freedom of information is certainly one of the best ways to combat a lot of these social problems in the world.
And freedom of information also, it has to promote a certain degree of honesty.
Right. There's always that.
No one wants to get caught. And even though you turn around and say, well, now if we're real careful, no one will ever find out about what we did. And even though people become extra careful, they shred emails, they erase hard drives and everything, there is always a trace of something that is out there which gives evil and evil people a reason to think before they do something. But also on the same token, too, there are an awful lot of people that don't give anything a thought. I mean, they do whatever they want to do. Now, during the Second World War, our good old friend Adolf Hitler, think of it this way: he was in Rome, and it would have been nothing for him to just totally sack the Vatican. Now, I mean, it's estimated that there's more money in the Vatican and in the archives and in the catacombs and everything and treasures that's probably than in the rest of the world. Well, do you think that if public opinion meant nothing to him, that he wouldn't have gone ahead and totally sacked at the Vatican, stolen everything that they had? But he knew that there would have been a total uprising in his own country against them, because a vast majority of the people were Catholic. So we couldn't afford to, even though it would have paid off monetarily, he couldn't afford to alienate his own people. So he just said, okay, I know when I'm beaten, we're going to have to get along with the Vatican. And that's basically what stopped the German army from, it would have been a sure victory. I mean, the German soldiers would have just mutinied in a heartbeat. And plus, it would have been worldwide outrage. I mean, while he might have been able to have found an excuse to exterminate all the Jews, whether he thought it was justified or not, he'd never have justified wiping out the Pope. And
right. Well, especially since the Pope was somewhat friendly to him at the time. And of course, there's a lot. I mean, there's so many arguments to go over there. We could spend the whole night talking about just that, but I think it's just move on.
Yeah. Well, also just one thing not to forget, that during the Second World War with Germany, it was not a country of atheists that killed 6 million Jews. It was an army of Christian soldiers, willingly, just following orders, that committed the Holocaust. So, I mean, you can try to put the blame where you want, but it was, Christianity had a hand in it.
I think some things people do is confuse that there was sometimes the Nazis criticized Christianity, but that doesn't mean they were against it. It's like I think they were most of their criticisms was that there was one true Christianity and no one else was Christian, which is like a common objection. And every Christian reformer has come out in criticism of the Christian establishment of the day. So I think that's where people get confused about that, but when they think that the Nazis were anti-Christian, they were just against some of the attitudes of the Christians of the day, which isn't an uncommon thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear that all the time, especially even from evangelists today. They talk about the state of the church and they criticize it.
And that's why there's so many different churches
exactly
today. So, I mean, if the whole Christian church, whole Christian movement can't get along, then it's not too unreasonable to think that people of other religions are going to get along as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I was going to go someplace else, but you were saying a little bit earlier that you had maybe some other things that you wanted to also talk about.
The only other thing I had on my list of things here was a development this week from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is the FFRF, which is actually filed a formal complaint against Answers in Genesis, mostly over their new park, called the Ark Encounter, which has actually already raised a bit of controversy in their handling of it. But now has gotten the violations they have just stacked up so much that the FFRF has submitted a formal complaint. And to give you an idea of what's going on with this, the Ark Encounter project is actually a for-profit company. Well, I should say, back up a second. What the FFRF is doing is challenging the Answers in Genesis nonprofit status. The reason for that is that Answers in Genesis, being a nonprofit, owns the Ark Encounter, which is actually a for-profit company. Now, nonprofit companies are actually allowed to own a for-profit company with similar interests, but they have to run the for-profit company as by the rules applied to for-profit companies. There are different rules for between nonprofits and for-profits. One example of this is a for-profit company is not allowed to discriminate against prospective employees based on the status of their religion, whereas a nonprofit company is allowed to do that. But what Answers in Genesis was doing was hiring positions that were obviously for the Ark Encounter project through Answers in Genesis, so they could restrict anybody they were hiring to only Christians, even though they weren't allowed to do that, and send them to work on well, they were allowed to do that on the nonprofit, but then they're not allowed to send that person to work to a for-profit company. And another thing they started doing was collecting donations for the Ark Encounter through the Answers in Genesis website, and even telling people that the donations would be tax deductible, which they're not, because the Ark Encounter again is a for-profit company. And the reason that it is a for-profit company and that they registered it as a for-profit company is so they could get some tax grants, because they could get some money if it's a for-profit company and label it as a tourist attraction. They can get, some states have it set up to support that kind of thing to help benefit local economies. So essentially, the Answers in Genesis is trying to have it both ways. They're trying to collect donations and hire people like it's a nonprofit company, but then asking for money like it's a for-profit company.
Which is a little deceptive.
What's that?
It's a little deceptive.
Yeah, it is. It is very deceptive. And they're really trying to cheat the system. And to the credit, the state legislature is already looking into this as to whether or not they want to pull the grant money. Now, I personally don't think that Answers in Genesis will lose its nonprofit status over this. What's probably going to happen is they're going to be forced to take the give the grant money back, or any grant money they've received back, and then refile Ark Encounter as a nonprofit. Is probably what's going to happen. Although if they do that, they're probably going to have to end the project because they've already come up short on funding. Like they've had to dramatically scale down what they intended to do because of lack of funding.
What did they intend to do?
What's that?
What did they actually intend to do?
I think the park was supposed to be on a much bigger scale than they wanted.
Yeah.
That was a much bigger scale, and they weren't able to raise as much as they wanted. So I think they significantly toned it down as what they were going to do.
Was the Ark supposed to be full size?
Well, I think it is, and I think it's still going to be. It just other pieces of the park are going to be smaller, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't looked at the blueprints in detail to know, but that's what I'm assuming is the issue there.
Were they supposedly going to build the Ark with old methods, or are they going to have chainsaws and stuff like that?
Well, I think that's interesting. I heard discussions. I don't know for sure, but I heard discussions about that once where actually they had architects telling them, no, this isn't going to work. I mean, if you were going to build it biblically, it wouldn't work. It really just wouldn't work. And if you could even just get it to stand, it wouldn't last very long.
Plus, they calculated that on an absolute calm sea like that, it would probably float like that. But the first real wave that they would have, first swell, the thing would break in half.
Right. And I think that came up in the debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham, where it's like the Ark itself wouldn't work, and that's it's kind of funny because this whole project has kind of drawn a circle around some of that, where not only do they have these technical problems with trying to build the thing, and then you have all these financial problems, which they've resorted to some deception to try to get money for this. Really is one of those things where a lot of atheist bloggers are having fun with this. I will say that right now.
Where did Noah get the money to get the lumber to build the ark? You know, I'm taking up a collection for the ark,
Right.
but you can't come in it when it starts to rain.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's funny because it's just one of those things where you look at it going, if there is a God, how could he let something like this go on? Have people like Answers in Genesis representing him. And, I look at, and one of the things that has kind of surprised me about,
Looks like we have a call. I didn't have to beg. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello?
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, caller.
Hi, you. Hey, a question and a comment.
Yes, sir.
I was listening to you talk about Hitler and the Catholic Church. Are you familiar with the Concord Act that he signed with the Vatican?
Sorry, would you repeat that?
Yeah, you're badly broken.
Are you familiar with the pact that Hitler signed with the Pope, the Concord Act, which basically, Hitler said, "I won't mess with the Catholic Church. You don't mess with the Nazi Party, and we'll coexist peacefully, and you can allow the third of the population that's Catholic. You will allow the priest to give the sacraments to Nazis, and we won't close down the churches or mess with you guys." Are you familiar with that?
I was finding it very difficult to hear what he was saying.
Yeah, it's coming out very distorted. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe I can't get through do you hear me better now?
Now we can hear you. They put it over a different speaker. Now, I hate to ask you this, but could you repeat that again?
Sure. Can you hear me better? You hear me better?
Yes, now that's much better.
Oh, okay. Are you familiar with the Concord Act, which Hitler signed with Pope Pius XI?
Yes.
Are you familiar with that? In 1833, the Concord Act?
Well, it wasn't just Pope Pius the 11th, too, wasn't it? Part of it, the 10th as well. It sort of, the collaboration started with the 10th and went into the 11th, or was it the 11th and went into the 12th? But I know that they sort of went through two popes.
Yeah, well, I'm just asking you. You did mention the pact that he signed with the Pope to kind of, you work your side of the street, we'll work our side of the street. So that's what I mean, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, it made sort of 6 cents, SICK, that everyone was sort of cooperating with one another. It would not be what you would call Christian, true Christian in theory. But, sometimes when you're faced with overwhelming odds, people do collaborate. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. And do I think that the popes, should be hung by their nails? Well, they were trying to save the church, who they probably saw as in peril at the time. And let's face it, at the time, and for many years beforehand, anti-Semitism was rife in Germany and other parts of Europe. So the Jews, unfortunately, were an easy victim, and no one really complained too loudly, although they claimed that many people, including the U.S. Government, knew of the atrocities that were going on. Nothing could be nothing could be done.
Also, I also want to ask you another question about that. Are you familiar with Martin Luther's treatise called The Jews and Their Lies?
I'm sorry. That's.
Did he just get cut off?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. For some reason, the distortion came back, and it's very difficult to hear what you're saying.
I think the string on my tin can might be had a kink in it here. Can you hear me better now?
What you just said, yes, I could hear that better.
Okay. Are you familiar with Martin Luther and his writing called "The Jews and Their Lies"?
You mean Martin Luther's publication?
Yes.
Yeah, and how that strongly had an influence on the Nazi what's the word I'm looking for?
Hierarchy.
Nazi policy.
Yeah.
Where they adopted things straight out of Martin Luther's writings for their own plan. Like in that book on the Jews and Their Lies by Martin Luther, who was the founder of Protestant Christianity, he put in what he called a 7-point plan for the Jews, which was pretty much directly adopted by the Nazis.
Which I think most Christians are totally unaware of, that the collusion between religion and the slaughter of millions of people. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. And I'll tell you something else too. There's a lot of people out there that they'll pass comments like the Holocaust never happened, or there were no 6 million Jews that were executed, that were murdered. But I would never argue about the number of people, of Jews, that were murdered or executed by some means or another. It really doesn't matter whether there was 6 or whether it was 6 million. What mattered was the intent of the Nazi Party and everything to make this Holocaust, if you want, to just annihilate a whole race of people. So the actual number didn't really matter. If they intended to do what they did was basically get rid of as many Jews as they could, then the number becomes meaningless, but their intention was the thing that you have to look at. And in that regard, the Nazi hierarchy that formulated it and carried out all the rounding up of Jews and sending them to the camps, they are the people that really were to blame. They were evil people. Anyway.
Well, that's... Hello?
Hello, I'm here.
Yeah, you're missing my point, though. Everything you said is correct, but my point is that a lot of Christians will point out that Hitler was an atheist or a non-believer, and they're totally ignorant of the connection between Christianity, Martin Luther, the Catholic Church, the Pope, and the slaughter of 6 million people. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, and that's the point where if there's any people watching you who are, Christians, who are thinking that atheist, this was an atheist thing, the murder of all these people, this was very much a Christian, doing as a result of Christianity and blaming the Jews for killing Christ.
Yes, I agree.
And I think that's the point. That I think that if we're going to change the way things are, people who've been brought up and indoctrinated into Christianity and the beliefs they have, I think it's very important to the connection between their morality, so-called, and this horrendous act, and that there is a very close connection between the slaughter of millions of men, women, and children who were dragged from their homes, put onto cattle cars, taken to concentration camps, and starved to death in slave labor, and then put into gas chambers and executed, that this was very much the result of Christianity.
Yes, I agree.
So it's just something I want to, make sure that many people listen, and I think it's very important. And I think in general, people who were indoctrinated as children under the very violent upbringing, you either believe this or you're going to go to hell, or even worse, you're going to leave the blood of your parents. I think it's, they've been kept from the truth. They've been kept from what reality is, and all the burning women as witches and all the violence of their religion. I think it's just really important for us to educate these people and bring to their attention for the first time the tremendous immorality that results from the belief system we call Christianity. Because I've heard people say again and again, Christian people say, oh, Hitler was an atheist, and this is just a perfect example of what happens when someone doesn't believe in God, that they're capable of this kind of slaughter. What the fact is that the Pope and Martin Luther, Catholicism and Protestantism were both deeply connected with Hitler and the results of the evil that he did.
Yes.
So that's all I wanted to say. That's the point I wanted to get.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it wasn't Nazis or the atheists that that promulgated this this atmosphere. I mean, even and besides, even let's just say that that Hitler he converted to atheism. Well, if he did, then he must have taken millions of Christians, German Christians, with him being converted, because it was still all the German Christians that were committing all these atrocities.
But yeah, that is the thing. It's no matter how ruthless the dictator, you still have to realize that the man in the field is the one doing it too.
Yeah. Is that it, caller? Oh, I guess that he's no longer on the air.
Yeah, and I also, unfortunately, I couldn't hear most of that. But I'd say in a general sense, in a general note here, I'm a little tired of talking about the Nazis, but unfortunately, we're kind of forced to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all through Christian apologetics. It's, if you look at even all the top Christian apologists are constantly shooting this argument at us. Even people like, big people like William Lane Craig have actually, in one of his books, he encouraged any Christian when talking to atheists to bring up the Holocaust. I'm not kidding, and that's the most irritating thing about it. Is like that's why we've got to go on the offensive. Why we tend to go on the offensive a little bit on this argument.
But we don't want to be defending,
Yeah.
Nazis or Hitler
Right.
or anything. But you wanted to correct the distortions
Right.
that have been put out there. I mean,
Right. And yeah, that's the thing. And sometimes it is like, yeah, let's get history right. And I think I'd say that in general too. There's a lot of bad history of people just trying to whitewash history. And it's funny when I start to look at history on my own, how much more I learn when you get past all the dressed up history, so to speak, and actually look at it for what it was.
yeah.
And actually things start to make a whole lot more sense, I would have to say. And I'll have to say, as I've left school, I've become more and more interested in history for that reason. It's actually mostly because it starts to make more sense when you start to look at it.
But you can't, of course, just look at one source
Right.
for history, because you kind of have to throw everything together like that and into one big soup, and you say, okay, I'm going to pick out all the carrots and everything else, and then try to come up with the true answer. Because I mean, for as long as people and not computers are writing history, you're going to have a little bit of cultural bias thrown in there.
Obviously. I mean, as the old saying goes, history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one person in the ancient Roman Empire who tried to argue that Rome conquered the world in self-defense.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes what I worry about America doing too, but...
I mean, yes, Rome did fight an awful lot of defensive battles. They had a lot of people on their borders, but they also rode a lot of campaigns way out beyond their own borders and picked on other people.
And not to mention each other.
Yeah.
There was near perpetual civil war in the Roman Empire, but that's and that's the thing. You look back at that and look at it in a different light and say, wow, I think and that's the one thing that the way we build our own, concept of right and wrong, good and evil, is to learn from humanity's past mistakes, and that's one thing I think a lot of people don't understand about when we look at morality. Well, they're like, well, what's your foundation for saying that? It's because we know we at least have some idea of the consequences of certain actions because those actions have already been taken. And like there's an old saying: those who don't understand those who don't know the past are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And that's why having an accurate portrayal of history is so important. Is so we don't, as a species, repeat those past mistakes. And that's our foundation. That can be a valid foundation for morality. Is looking at, okay, what we've learned from these that okay, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. It's not like we're going to wake up tomorrow and say, oh, hey, slavery's okay again.
Yeah.
We've been there, done that, and know that's not right. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is, they think, well, what if we wake up tomorrow and say this? Well, we're not going to, because we already know. At least most of us. I mean, there's still countries practicing slave labor, and they're diminishing every day. But
Now, if you want to read something, about history that is rather interesting, Niccolo Machiavelli. You've heard the expression how Machiavellian something is, and usually that meant like evil, underhanded, despicable. and everything. But he wrote this little discourse called "The Prince." That's like in royalty, the Prince. And in it, what he does is that he draws from history all of the bad, the evil things that past conquerors and successful conquerors have done in order to win wars and battles, and to take over land and to maintain a territory. And if people think of him, oh yeah, he's an evil man, but actually he was a great historian. And if you read this book, The Prince by Machiavelli, like that, you'll see what the heck we were like, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and what people actually did against their fellow man. So it's an interesting book to read.
Right. It's always interesting to read, the writings, not necessarily people recording history, but actual writings of the people at the time. You start to get into their mind of what people felt at the time, and that can give an incredible context to history. Like, I've sometimes said I probably learned more about American history reading the works of Thomas Paine than anything else. Mm-hmm. Just because he just hearing him talk about what was going on and what he saw kind of put context to all the little facts that they kind of just throw out at you without really saying much, but you get the whole story of what was going on.
Yeah.
And I thought one interesting thing that Carl Sagan said in the original Cosmos when he was talking about the ancient Egyptian scientists and how much they were discovering about the universe, and he said, they were trying to unlock the questions of the stars without really questioning the slavery that was going on all around them. It's just
profound statement, very profound statement.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
like, they were more as intelligent enough to think this way, but they couldn't solve what some people would consider as the easiest moral question ever. But it really wasn't, and that's how humanity has developed, and that's why I think there's some hope for the future still.
But the hope for the future lies in people viewing the past and the present with open eyes.
Right.
And unless you have open eyes and you are willing to look at everything as well as look in the mirror and not only see a nice reflection, but also look at the warts and the moles as well. And that is what is the key to the future, is being able to realize.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's one final thought is the important thing about morality is to always be questioning your stance on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, people seem to think you need this rigid set of right and wrong in order for there to be true right and wrong, but that's not the case. It's to make sure we have a good picture on it. It's important that we're always questioning it, always trying to find out, well, what are the correct underlying facts?
Yep.
But that's all the time we have for tonight. So
Good evening.